You are listening to audio from the Decidedly podcast. This episode is a highlight clip from this week's full episode. To listen in on the complete conversation, see the show notes for the link to the complete show. You can help us out by leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate every bit of your support. I'm Morgan McKittrick, your producer, and this is Decidedly.
You've got real influence on people's lives and young people's lives. And so when we look at that influence, part of that, purposeful or not, it's about decision making, right? You're teaching people how to effectively make better decisions. So when you think about that, what would you say, and maybe that you already had this worked out, maybe you didn't, but what would you say were your decision-making framework? How do you help people make better decisions as a pastor or as a minister?
Well, as a pastor, I think the first frame is, does it go against, or is it pro or against in the Bible? So as a pastor, the Bible is the framework. Now, there's a whole lot in life that is gray and doesn't explicitly say, if in the Bible you should or shouldn't do these things. And so I always, even now, like the platform in ministry was just preparation for the platform I have now. I would always ask, even as students, well, does this get you closer to where you want to be? And as a student, they may not be able to say, like, I have this big vision for my life, but
they don't even necessarily know where they want to be.
No. And so it's like, is it helpful to you? Do you think so? Have you considered what may happen if it doesn't go as you think it might? What are you going to do if it goes well? What are you going to do if it doesn't go well? And so I would always just have conversations with students, and most of the time it was, my parents are too mean. I think my teacher's stupid, or whatever. It's very, what we would say as adults, that's trivial.
Yeah.
But for a student, it's very real. Just like with us, our problems are very real to us, no matter if they're trivial to somebody else. And so even today, is it helpful to where you want to be, or the next thing you think is possible for you? Is it taking you closer to or further away that idea of what you want to be and become? And then if it goes well, what are you going to do to move forward? If it goes bad, what are you going to do to move forward? So that was a lot of what I did even as a youth pastor. And then when I shifted to leading adults, and then now even with my clients I have in the coaching I do, it's a pretty much the same framework.
Yeah. It sounds like focusing on what's truly important to them, right? How do you get a kid who might actually think something is truly important to them, but it isn't? Like they haven't they don't have the self-awareness at 16. At least I didn't. I didn't have the self-awareness at 16 to be able to say, oh, this is actually what I want for myself, and this explicitly is not. I could justify it. If my mom or dad said, is that really where you want to go? I go, yeah. Yeah, it is.
I think at 16, you're looking at immediate gratification, right? It primarily driven by that immediate gratification and that social influence, like we were talking about earlier. And so I think when you look at decision making at that age, and certainly from a framework of a pastor, the going back to the source material, I think is key. Now, you said the Bible, right? And as a pastor, that would be a good framework to use. Right. But I think at any age, you might even have to say, what is my source material that I'm using to make this decision? And I think a lot of people who are that age, 16-year-olds, may not know what that source material is. And that might be that disconnect you were talking about, Sanger, is that, at 16, I'm not sure what my source material is at 16. Right. And if somebody comes in and says it's the Bible or it's this, you might need a pause to take a step and go, is it for me? No, maybe it is, but maybe yet have that. Maybe I'm not yet convinced that that is my source material for me, right? And so I think that may be the thing. We have to sort of back up and not try and impose that, that you need to use this as your source material, right? Is that sort of show these proof sources to say, hey, this stuff is helpful if you use it, like what you were saying. This does help you direction. I think you got to let a kid skin their knee, right? Certainly, and the way that we even learn as adults is we make some decisions. We burn our hand on that hot stove. We pull back. The problem is if we do it again, right? Are you repeatedly burning your hand on that hot stove? Well, then we got a problem about your decision making. But I don't fault you. If you slip and fall and skin your knee, there's that natural consequence that goes, oh yeah, maybe I won't run down the stairs so fast in an ice storm. So yeah, I think those are good lessons for kids to learn, and adults too. As business owners, we'll make some decisions. Go, maybe I don't want to make that decision again. But I think we have to be self-reflective enough that we learn from those decisions to say, all right, what did I do here? What was my decision that I made? I see so many times that people will not take that time to be self-reflective. If they make a bad hire or they make a bad client acquisition or bad business deal.
I wish that I had more access whenever I was younger to decision-making frameworks, because there were a lot. I think that most people learn lessons. Like most people, they do burn their hand on the stove and they don't do it again. There's a subsegment of the population that will not learn. It does not matter. They will keep burning their hand repeatedly over and over and over. Mm-hmm. And then they'll convince themselves that they like having a blistered, scarred, warped hand, right? There are those people out there.
Or it's the stove's fault.
Yeah, or it's the stove's fault. We can't help those people, right? At least I'm not skilled enough to help those people. But the other 90% of the population, they're going to learn. And I think that the concrete, like the distinction, or what's missing, is that we think too concretely about those lessons. So a lot of people, they burn their hand on the stove and they go, oh, don't touch stoves. But there's a higher level lesson, and the lesson is maybe I should understand my surroundings better. Maybe I should be more thoughtful in general about the things that I touch, not simply avoid that single one thing, because later on, a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, I'm going to run into something that doesn't look anything like a stove, and I'm going to burn my hand again. And
that's a good point.
We have that experience so much as kids. Well, maybe like I didn't do my homework and I got a bad grade in class and that was bad. And the lesson is I got to do my homework next time. Well, that is a lesson. That's the most concrete application of that lesson possible. There's a deeper lesson. The lesson there is that why did I not do my homework? Did I not do it because I didn't plan? Did I not do it because I didn't remember? Did I not do it because I actually knew about it and chose to pursue something else? Or did I not do it because I allowed the anxiety of completing the assignment to overwhelm me, and then I couldn't address that anxiety, and so I ignored it and chose to not do it? Okay, well, I've got to understand that and then address that. And the lesson is, oh, my anxiety stopped me from doing it. I actually knew I had to do my homework. I didn't do my homework on purpose. So next time when I feel that anxiety, I got to know in the moment, as soon as I feel it, it's going to hold me back from achieving my potential. It's not just I got to do my homework. And I don't know if 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds are going to grasp that, but I know that wasn't ever told to me when I was that age. No one ever said, hey, you had a bad consequence. Here's a higher level. They only drew concrete, direct pathways. And they would say, oh, Sanger, you didn't do your homework? You're going to fail out of high school. You're going to fail college. You'll never get a job in your life, you loser. Oh, okay. Well, I don't think that's the lesson. And so I would just keep not doing my homework. I'd say, oh, well, screw that. That's clearly not the lesson. Therefore, there is no lesson. And there's always a lesson.
So how do you think we get people to, this is a question for you, Sanger. So how do we get, because that's an excellent point. how do you think you get people to understand this larger lesson? Not just don't touch the stove, but how am I evaluating what things I touch?
They have to have a guide. Like you have to have a pastor that can break that down for you and say, hey, man, it wasn't just that. Yeah, it's not just that yelling at your mom is bad. Okay, yeah, you're in trouble. You didn't get to come to youth group tonight because you yelled at your mom. You're right. That's bad. Don't do that. But how much higher level can we take this? Maybe it's the lesson is you had a consequence because of your action here. And that action wasn't just yelling at your mom. It was dishonoring your family and dishonoring your parents. It wasn't just dishonoring your family or dishonoring your parents. It was that you don't know how to manage your emotions at the peaks and valleys. And you're going to react in ways that are unhealthy, and you're going to do things you don't mean, and they're going to have consequences. So yeah, don't yell at your mom, for sure. But it's more than that. And you have to have someone that knows you intimately and that you trust to give you that advice. And a lot of kids, unfortunately, they don't have that. Or maybe they just have one person that can do that. And when that person's not around, they're not getting any sort of lesson. But I think great pastors are going to do that. Great advisors are going to do that. Great coaches are going to do that. They're going to say, hey, little buddy, you screwed up. Now, you didn't just get a flag on the play. It was a bigger lesson for you. At 15, at least, I think that's the only hope. I don't think most 15-year-olds are self-aware enough to figure that out. They turn 35, look backwards, and go, oh, yeah, whenever I was 15, that's what I did. And they learn the lesson 20 years later or 10 years later or 50 years later. Looking inward and looking inward is the only way.
So I was at I told you about this when I came back from the conference, and John Maxwell had spoken. And he mentioned just offhandedly, he said, people come up to me after presentations, and they'll say, oh, I want to write books like you. I want to do speeches like you do. And he said, yeah, there's a lot of people who want to do what I do, but they're not willing to do what I did. And that is such a key question. Does it go through the acid test? Are you willing to do what it takes to achieve this goal? This is what you want for yourself. And so clearly you have to know, to be able to answer that question, that acid test, am I willing to do what it takes to achieve this goal? I'd have to know, well, what does it take? Right. So I've got to get with a mentor that, like you talked about, and, like Travis Luter, just to explain, well, here's what it's going to take to reach this goal.
Thanks for making the great decision to listen in to this week's episode highlight. If you want more of what you just heard, see the show notes for the full episode. As always, for the latest decision-making tips, find us on decidedlypodcast.com or on Instagram @decidedlypodcast. And be sure to sign up for our weekly newsletter from the link in the show notes. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review as well. We read all of your comments, so if you learned some decision-making tips today, let us know. Until next time, this is Decidedly. Insights, advice, and comments provided by Sean Smith, Sanger Smith, and speakers identified as part of the Decidedly podcast should not be considered recommendations. Speakers who are not identified as members of Decidedly are expressing their own opinion, and their statements should not be construed as reflecting the views of the Decidedly team. This podcast is produced solely for informational purposes, not personalized advice.